we have the ability to expand our mind and our empathy when we meet people from other cultures.
What I did learn is that when you're on your purpose and mission, you get into this place of what's called abundance, the abundant state.
We're here with Ben Rose, founder and CEO of COPALA, and Mike Markoff, an amazing and talented actor. What does it mean to be a conscious explorer? When you hear that term, conscious explorer, which is sort of the tagline of COPALA, what does that mean to you?
So when I hear conscious explorers, I think of going to a place to integrate and to learn.
What was your experience in Israel for a year?
It is a give and take. It is a handshake of learning from that culture and contributing to it.
It's about living with purpose and having intention and letting the universe collaborate with you. Hello, I'm James McCrae. We're here with Ben Rose, founder and CEO of COPALA, and Mike Markoff, an amazing and talented actor. And we're here to discuss what it means to be a conscious creator, a conscious explorer, and living and doing business with purpose. So, Mike, I want to start with you and ask you a question about what does it mean to be a conscious explorer? When you hear that term, conscious explorer, which is sort of the tagline of COPALA, what does that mean to you?
I guess I spent a good amount of my life completely overseas. And I guess sometimes I really ruminate on why I did that. And I think about Americans and why don't Americans travel? When you're overseas, you meet a lot of Australians, you meet a lot of Canadians, a lot of people from Germany. America, we don't really do it. We go to Mexico, a couple very distinct parts where, we take vacations and we go to a place that simulates the comforts that we really enjoy and value when we have time off. And this culture in America of that version of traveling kind of involves like going to a place, trying to just suck it dry for everything that it's worth and leaving it behind without perhaps absorbing some of the virtues that place genuinely has to offer. So when I hear conscious explorers, I really think of not a vacation. I think of going to a place to integrate and to learn. Because there's so much, at least this is retrospective, because everything I know I kind of learned from being in some really fascinating places and interacting with some really incredible people. I really learned that it's culturally, it goes without saying that like we have the ability to expand our mind and our empathy when we meet people from other cultures. And yeah, when I first happened upon COPALA and that messaging just is right there on the screen. In fact, I'm pretty sure it's all black with just that line there.
Conscious explorers wanted.
Yeah, I think that's it. Yeah, and I was immediately kind of intrigued and immediately really connected with that in general. And then, of course, went on to see the super cool clothes and, I had to investigate further.
So that's how you found COPALA through the...
I did. It's just, I may have been shamelessly scrolling as I'm wont to do. And I found COPALA and COPALA found me. And Ben made sure that was no accident. So
the algorithm somehow works. Somehow.
Hey, I think that, God, the universe, whatever you want to call it, can work through can work through the algorithm.
Yeah,
you can. I met my wife on a dating app. You never know what's out there on the world wide webs. So Mike, it sounds like traveling had a pretty formative influence on your childhood.
Yeah. Well, I mean, at first, I grew up taking the typical vacations. That's what I had to really compare it to. My family was definitely into the all inclusive vacation in Mexico kind of vibe. So I kind of grew up doing that. I got started with acting pretty young, and I hit a wall when I was 20. and I just left the country. I was beside myself. You know, when you're an artist and you're so hell bent on doing something, that was me for so long. And I woke up one day, didn't like myself, didn't like what I was doing. Wasn't about the art anymore. I moved out to LA too young. It became about like other things. It became about like showing people back home. And I kind of had this, I guess you would call it sort of a panic attack. And so I literally, I just picked up and left with not nearly enough money and virtually no plan. And it carried on like that for about 9 years.
But you're curious. You had like a will to like explore.
It was completely instinctual at that time. It was always my urge to explore, and like everyone else, you know, I think, oh, I can't really afford to do that. I can't really uproot my life. I've got, you know, I've got college. I have this career path. I've got my parents who would be worried about me. I have my friends and everything. And I basically at that point in my life didn't have any of that. I had this whole plan that just completely went away overnight, right? Because that panic attack, what it made me realize is I guess it was the first time I realized that I wasn't infallible. Mm-hmm. And so when I felt like I really didn't have anything to no responsibilities to attend to either for myself or for others, I guess I kind of just took off. It was easy to take off at first because I started off by doing the birthright trip to Israel, which is a free trip if you're Jewish and you're under 30. Sure. And I'm like, this is a good way to get going. This will get me on a flight there.
So that was your catalyst.
Yeah, it was the catalyst. Yeah, it sure was. And I got there. I ended up staying for a year rather than just the 10 days. And I was actually went into this, it was a deeply Kabbalistic Hasidic rabbinical school, part like a yeshiva. And I stayed and I studied there for a year, and then I just kind of set off from there.
What was your experience in Israel for a year? Did you find a deep connection to that tradition, to those people? Did you, what was that like?
Yeah, it was pretty remarkable. At first, it was really difficult because it was ultra Orthodox. So it was all basically, everything was attained through following all the mitzvahs and all of the aspects of the most strict Judaism you can imagine, which, you know, I mean, when you're looking at it in front of you, it looks like, you know, guys with big beards wearing black and white, praying all day, and then, you know, translating Aramaic into Hebrew and into English just to find out that, well, this is, if you move a mule cart 30 feet on Shabbat, it's not breaking Shabbat if it's a round wheel as opposed to a pegged wheel. I don't know, stuff
very
like that.
Very specific rules,
right? But what would happen is you would as you go deeper, you start finding all the different layers of Hasidus, which is what the COPALA, which is a little bit more of a spirituality in a vacuum kind of version of it. Sure. And it became incredibly immersive and really, really intense. It was a lot of drinking. These guys drink a lot.
Really?
Yeah, because that's how they elevate and bless things. And
what do they drink? What's the tradition?
I mean, it's really, technically speaking, during, you know, the diaspora, you know, a lot of them ended up in Russia, so vodka was kind of the kind of the vibe there, right? But what I really found, the biggest thing, my biggest takeaway, I ended up getting kicked out for a strange reason, but the biggest takeaway,
story for another day.
The biggest takeaway was placing intention and value into all things. So even like when you pick up something to eat it or drink it, you have to bless it first, which seemed like a lame concept at first when you're a kid and you're Jewish and you got to do all these like prayers and everything. And then it started becoming really incredible because you're actually, when you pick up a beverage and you do the blessing for it, what you're also saying is basically you're speaking to God of the universe to say that first off that you're grateful, and second that this isn't while this is used to quench my human body, it's meant to feed my soul so I can go on and do work, you know. And this phrase from Rabindranath Tagore that I always loved. when you talk about what's our life purpose and this idea of service, which you two had mentioned before, is there's this line that says, "I slept and dreamt that life was joy. I awoke and saw that life was service. I acted and beheld that service was joy." And so all the intentionality behind Judaism is very much about how you are keeping this meat suit alive so that you can do things that are non-physical, right? So that things that are non-physical, those are acts of spirituality, are those are acts of giving, so to speak. It's not about being in a room with Enya music playing and everything. It's really you being in the act that it's in and of itself is godly or spiritual.
So would you say that you were at that time consciously traveling and intentionally traveling, or were you kind of just in this kind of ingesting all this information to figure out kind of stages or where you were at?
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, being in a place like that kind of guides you automatically to a certain extent, right? Here, you're in this extraordinary place of history, and there's so much there to kind of uncover that I guess the short answer is to say you're automatically conscious. Because when you're there, when you're immersed in it, it's all so much bigger than you. It's all such a center of conflict. It's all the confluence of all of these different ideologies. And that it's so much bigger than you, that it's my previous experience with traveling was wondering if the waffle bar was going to close before I got there, the breakfast buffet. And now all of a sudden, and of course there was something going on in Gaza, but we're going back, when I was there, it was just like 2008, or I think it was, and everything. But I think it was definitely, it was my indoctrination into conscious traveling, and what would furthermore lead to many years of doing the same style.
That's beautiful, and such a transition from auditioning in LA and trying to pick up roles and getting caught up in that whole industry machine to just really going to Israel and just being of service and just really studying the history and the traditions. And what a transition that must have been. So when you left Israel, where was next?
Yeah, then after Israel, I pretty much took off for Europe, and that's where I spent the remainder of my money. So then I had to go into Eastern Europe, where things cost a lot less. And then when you go to Eastern Europe, you find that like it's so much better. It's like these are when you go to like Barcelona, Berlin, everything starts kind of like feeling the same. Everything. And then you go to Eastern Europe, which at that time it was just kind of opening itself up to like hospitality, you could say, so to speak. You go to when you're in Western Europe, you have everyone telling you, don't go to Eastern Europe, it's filled with gypsies. And I'm like, I think those might be my people though. And I show up in Romania, and it's like the most incredible place I've ever been to. Everything costs nothing. People are so beautiful. You have ancient Roman architecture everywhere. You've got these castles nestled on these mountainsides. Everyone hitchhikes to get everywhere. And I was doing that, and I was meeting all these like incredible people and like absorbing so much culture and learning so much about the Romanians, who are like so wonderful and beautiful in the sense of history there. And I had met this girl. It's not a story like that, but I met this girl, and she was a doctor, and she went to medical school in Paris originally, and nobody took her seriously because she was from Romania. And I was like, man, the funny thing is when you're a traveler or a conscious traveler, you're always like trying to get to a place to have a genuine kind of moment and immerse yourself in a real kind of way. And I couldn't do that in Berlin, and I couldn't really do that in London. But when I went to a place that kind of had a little bit of a stigma attached to it, and I saw just how free it was, like that's kind of the frontier, like places like that. I'm kind of like imagining what the Philippines or Thailand would have been like, in the 70s for people. Because now we're kind of like, well, what's left to explore now? Cultures are kind of dying, and tech has made everything borderless and everything. And man, it was going to these post-communism countries who had a damn tough time, where all the money that was supposed to go to social programs went to a couple of oligarchs. And now you have this kind of phase where the oncoming generation is empowered. And
So after you've been extensively traveled. If you were to break down what conscious travel or conscious exploration is for you, like in a few bullet points, how would you like break it down?
Conscious travel is it is it is a give and take. It is a handshake of learning from that culture and contributing to it as a human being. Because yes, different places, different cultures. When we shake hands on a human level, you realize that there's always so much to learn and always so much to give. And the funny thing is like giving is a hell of a lot easier than people think. We go to places and we're all there ready to receive all the time. And you realize that you can like make a massive difference by like becoming seriously amazing friends with the dude who's roasting coffee beans and learning about that. And then you always, whenever you dig a little deeper, and I don't mean just like, oh, you give, yeah, cool. If I give someone $30 in Thailand, that's like a good amount of money to someone in Thailand. I don't mean it like that, but there's, I guess you really kind of realize that when you are conscious while you are traveling, when you are not on autopilot ready to receive, you open yourself up for the opportunities, not just to have extraordinary experiences. You open up the opportunities to see what your capacity to give is.
Yeah, beautiful. And it's exactly what, and why Mike and I connected, right? This vision of like giving back and giving back more than we take as a general ethos. And so we created this, we call it the Conscious Explorer Guide, right? Which is kind of a modern, like lonely planet for the conscious traveler. And I had the pleasure of shooting our first adventure with Mike in a small town called Taxco, Mexico. And we really went on an adventure, and it embodied kind of a lot of I got to know Mike a lot better. Mm-hmm. And as I was getting to know him, funny enough, on a photo shoot, I saw him with his shirt off, and he literally has a tattoo of a compass on his chest.
Wow.
And I'm like, this man is the archetypal conscious explorer that we're searching for. And he embodies this lifestyle. It's just not talk with Mike, right? He kind of lives it. He's done it. He's tried it. And I really appreciated the experience that we had. And so, Mike, what did you think of the trip?
Yeah, it was extraordinary. And I told Ben this a few times. So this trip was wrapped around my bachelor party. In
Congratulations.
Thanks. So, I had this bachelor party in Tulum leading up to my wedding. And that's when kind of the idea for Taxco had actually come up. It was friends of mine and had a property down there. So I knew I had always wanted to go. And it was just when I was starting to speak with Ben, put both together. And so I went right after my bachelor party, which, my best friends, my brother's there, and it's all these good times. And I had so much of a better time in Taxco on this adventure. And it's also just because something so typical like a bachelor party wouldn't be something I would ever really enjoy. But going to Taxco, we spent a lot of time with this family that was super, super incredible. And this place in Mexico, so it's I guess it's technically in Guerrero. And it's this old silver mining town built into the side of the mountain. You're there and it just feels like legacy. It feels like it's been there for a long time and it's been through so many different evolutions, and it amongst those evolutions holds on to this like sense of history and this culture and the food and the beverage and the art and everything is so deeply ingrained there. It's so utterly genuine. And yeah, it was, and then on top of that, just extraordinary nature all around. And yeah.
And it was wild. We actually stayed in a home that Diego Rivera and Frida Kahlo stayed in.
Wow.
It was unbelievable. You could still feel that energy. We had the experience this incredible waterfall that like was off the beaten path. It just literally opened up. It wasn't even that long open to the public. That we got to see and kind of explore. And what won it over for me, because when Mike called me and said, hey, go on a bachelor party, but really there's this place called Taxco. that I think we should check out. And I looked into it, and that's when I discovered the alignment, and almost through like kismet, right? Like things just kind of aligned. I learned that Cortez actually stopped in this mining town called Taxco, a couple hundred years ago on his search for COPALA. And when I saw that alignment and the fact that he was available and he was wanting to like go and immerse himself more into the culture and the lifestyle, and he already embodied the lifestyle, I was like, hell yes. Right?
When you see that, you're almost like, this brand is more than something that I'm just creating. This is something that is just coming through me. Like, this is something that it's kind of in the stars to a degree.
It's, I don't want to say that I'm a channel.
Yeah.
Anyway.
We all are.
I don't want to say I'm a god, but let me just tell you.
But I'm an aspect of Christ consciousness.
I've been thinking about this literally since I've been 14, right? Like, and you have this idea of what you want in life, and you don't really discover your mission or your purpose until you become more of an adult, right? Because through experience, the hardships and the wins and the losses and all those things teach you. And what I did learn is that when you're on your purpose and mission, you get into this place of what's called abundance, the abundant state, and things just start to flow and become in flow. And I think that meeting Mike and even meeting yourself, right? That was all part of the flow state of me being in the abundant state.
This is a big paradigm shift that we're going through. I feel like when you force something, there's going to be friction and you're fighting uphill. But I feel like when you just sink into your nature and allow yourself to go with the flow, that's when synchronicities will emerge around you. So you don't have to force it. It's about living with purpose and having intention and letting the universe collaborate with you and line things up. And it's just about letting go and just being in flow rather than force, and just being guided by purpose rather than, just trying to achieve something for the sake of achieving it.
No, it's very Taoist of you.
I'm kind of a Taoist, to be honest.
Yeah, well, it always, you were talking, and it was kind of reminding me of, when you learn about like Forrest Gump and how he's actually based off of a Taoist sage.
Is that right?
And they say, be like a feather in the wind. And how does that movie start and end? Right? I don't know if you recall, but it starts with a feather in the wind. Yeah. And it's even the whole characters, the two characters that are the most influential in his life that he references are his mother and Lieutenant Dan. And they're these warring sort of concepts between life is like a box of chocolates. You don't know what you're going to get. Like, there's no greater plan. And then there's Lieutenant Dan, who's always like, no, you have a destiny. I have a destiny. I was supposed to die out there. And at the end, at Jenny's grave, he says, I think it's a little bit of both. I think both are happening at the same time, which is to say that you must go with the flow, be like a feather in the wind. But at the same time, feel confident that you have a greater destiny that you can fulfill. But you have to be a person of action. Absolutely, it's a balance. It's purposeful action and flowing rather than forcing. But I'm glad you brought movies back into it. You're in a great new movie on Netflix called Hitman. Yeah, I really enjoyed that movie, a Richard Linklater movie. So I want to get back to, after all of your travels. Yeah. You go back into acting. I always say as a writer, a writer needs life experiences to draw from in order to be a better writer. So how did all of your travels and your explorations, how did that impact your acting once you got back into it? Yeah. So I got back into it about 7 or 8 years ago. So yeah, you figure just like 20 to 30, I was gone, washed up ashore, wherever else. And I got back into it, and it felt completely different this time around. And it is just like how you say, it's like after you've lived some life and you've interacted and found different parts of yourself. It's amazing what happens when an audition comes up and you have a character that you need to fill, and all of a sudden, and listen, that traveling experience, even 8 years later, that whole lifestyle is still marinating. I still don't fully understand it. What is very interesting about it is I was able to really, I guess, with traveling, especially long-term traveling and conscious traveling, what you don't kind of know, while on Instagram, it may have looked like I was cool and free, but really it was like holding a magnifying glass to my problems 24 hours a day. I didn't have all those rituals that we kind of like hold on to stay sane or static, right? You have your buddies that hang out at Wednesday night where they do trivia night at the local bar, and you do that every Wednesday. And it's comfortable that you do it every Wednesday. And is Phil going to be there? Oh, Phil's going to get drunk or whatever. And there was none of that familiarity to stop me from thinking. All I could do was think and overthink. And when I was thousands of miles away from anybody who cared if I lived or died, and it was destructive behavior in a certain regard at that time, I found out that I ended up being so motivated by story, so motivated by fictional characters. Fictional characters are what motivated me. Like that's strange. And so when I got back into it, I keep that so much abreast because I like to say that because most of the roles that I played that I've been successful in have been antagonists and really imperfect people, and it's always because I empathize with other people's faults. In fact, like your typical like protagonist, your Michael J. Fox hopping around like all super happy-go-lucky and everything's just going so well. I mean, the protagonist never made sense to me. The antagonist made a lot more sense to me. A mistake that spiraled out of control. And when I was traveling, I made so many mistakes and I was forced to deal with them. I couldn't run away to my room because mostly I didn't have a room. I had like a hostel or a rolling thing. Eventually, look, I had a certain way of travel that I was doing when I was working and everything. I became a consultant, like a vague consultant of food and beverage, which that was bullshit at first. And then I actually found out how to do it.
Fake it till you make it.
But yeah, no, I mean, it's like now in the craft of acting in every art, it's all about what you bring into it. And I'm extremely, extremely fortunate to have met so many extraordinary people on my travels and was forced, and I wasn't doing it at first, forced to learn so much being immersed in certain places. Because it's hard because originally when I was living abroad and traveling, I just wanted to be an American and have bring all of that with me. And then there was a giving away, a sort of an unleashing of like, okay, I don't have an identity anymore the way I used to have it. I'm ready to absorb and to learn.
So how did that experience, now that you're a married man?
Yeah.
You just had your honeymoon.
I did.
And you went to Africa. How was your travels different in partnership than it was by yourself?
A million times better, for one thing. So there's this kind of cool thing about being like a lone traveler or whatever, but it's everything is better when it's shared. And I think that actually kind of goes for everything. And I don't think we're meant to walk this earth on our own. I think it's too hard. I just straight up think it's too hard. And that's just to put it simply and bluntly. Being able, obviously, a honeymoon, it's like, it's the thing in and of itself is something that, a couple is meant to enjoy. And this is going to start off their life and just, doing something special. But doing it for so long in Africa was just so incredible because it turned into this existence with the natural world that I didn't think that I would be so jazzed about it. I'd heard about this. I said, oh yeah, you go to Africa, it's going to change your life. Yeah, you're going to, trust me, you're going to see the giraffe and it's going to be a whole thing. It is. Seeing the giraffe is a thing. And it ended up, I got a lot more than I bargained for. We were in Zimbabwe, we were in Kruger, we were in the Eastern Cape. And we're on all of these game reserves, these places where people seek to create an ecological balance so the natural world can survive. And without them, they'd be gone. Our favorite animals would be gone. And being able to go around with a ranger and a guide who would get me like excited about birds. I don't care about birds, but because like he was a bird watcher, it all became so contagious. And now my wife's a bird watcher, and I'm like, oh man. And yeah, it was extraordinary. We got involved with the local townships too, with some of the game reserves that we were on, and got to hang out with like a lot of like awesome kids. I've got like no rhythm, so I couldn't keep up with the drumming. But yeah, the whole thing was.
So it's like a perfect example of like mixing kind of this idea of this conscious exploration. You mix the immersion into the culture. It wasn't just about a safari or game drive. He went and you kind of did you involved yourself with the children to give back, and and really you came out of it wanting to do a conservation movie.
Yeah. There was one particular property we stayed at. They gave us this really incredible opportunity to do some behind the scenes things. I can say the name of the property. It's called Lalabella, but I can't say the thing that we did because there's certain kind of things that you keep obscured in your game reserve if there's maybe sensitive or threatened animals there. And it was the most one of the most incredible experiences of my life is getting the real behind the scenes of the lengths that certain altruistic foundations and people go through in order to keep these animals alive and thriving. And I was so taken with the whole experience, and I got a chance to sit down to dinner with the owner, and yeah, we're having discussions right now about opening up the story to the world and trying to tell it, and so people can understand what I think the general public is not aware of right now. That one, poaching is still extraordinarily, massively an issue. How important these types of game reserves are, and then also, quite frankly, how the South African government doesn't quite support its people, particularly the Black South Africans, the way we think it might. We think about South Africa, and we think about beautiful wine countries, we think about luxurious safaris and everything, and it's not enough. And so, yeah, very motivated right now to straight up make a movie about it. So.
That's incredible. That might answer my next question, but I was wondering, like, one thing Ben likes to talk about and just the ethos behind COPALA is having a company with a bigger purpose. So with your own craft as an actor, as a movie maker, what does it mean to be an actor or a professional creator with purpose?
Yeah, absolutely. At first I was just telling myself, oh, well, this is how I was motivated. Maybe this is the way I can motivate people or whatever, just being a part of movies, collecting a nice paycheck. But what I found specifically, what my calling has been playing antagonists. And we understand that, look, a lot of films and stories out there, and I do believe that we learn by story. In fact, in ancient tribes, those were the most important people, were the storytellers. Yeah,
that's our mythology.
Learned, right? And basically what I found was that so many stories, while they can be stories of hope, a lot of our stories that we learn from are cautionary tales. And particularly, even if it's a story of hope, some characters exist as cautionary tales, and they're incredibly important. And look, you talk to an actor and they'll always be like, yeah, man, I like playing the bad guy. It's cool or whatever. And that's crap. Because we have this idea that the bad guy in a movie is some kind of the equivalent of like a Disney villain who's evil for the sake of being evil. And that's bullshit. It's bullshit because all of us behave badly sometimes. All of us fuck up. And sometimes those fuck ups spiral out of control. And sometimes there's a part of us who's still good, watching from the inside out, begging that part of them to stop, and they can't. And I find that doing justice to these kinds of characters is extremely important because it's very easy to just go in there, be angry, and be evil. But what is at the genesis of all of that? It's pain. And we all experience it. We all walk this earth experiencing suffering. If we got everything we wanted today, tomorrow would still be a challenge, right? And so it's become for me, and I didn't know why this was happening at first. A lot of when an agent would take me on, I'd be like, okay, cool, great, Mike, can we see you're going to be our next leading man and all this. And what they find surprising is that the roles that I end up booking are these really strange antagonist characters, because I think I give them a little bit of humanity.
Yeah.
Because and it's like I say, like, I empathize with people's faults. I don't empathize with Michael J. Fox in Back to the Future. I don't empathize with Ferris Bueller and Ferris Bueller. In fact, Ferris Bueller's an asshole. He takes advantage of people the whole movie, screws over his sister, his teacher, everyone. Screws up a whole great parade just for his own self-entitled, self-righteous. They're going to make, I'm just pissed off at those kinds of characters. And I'm pissed off that Hollywood let that go on for so long. But now we are in the age of the anti-hero. We are in the age of, stories where characters have more realistic arcs. And so I'm happy to be a part of storytelling that's like that these days.
I love that. Yeah, it's bringing more empathy into the stories and more depth of character that's honest and true. And I think there's some healing that takes place when you kind of come to terms with that true spectrum of the human experience.
Totally. And it's okay to it's, a lot of we don't give ourselves the permission to accept that we've fucked up. We don't give ourselves the permission to accept that we're imperfect. And I think once you do, it's incredibly liberating, and it's also really incredible steps to healing and self-actualization, right? And it's really amazing when we can empathize, when we actually communicate that to other people. You find that other people will relate to you more. You find that we keep our vulnerability and our issues inside. When people don't realize that if I put my issues on the table right now, you guys would help take pieces of it away from me. And that's how I view friendships and relationships. The friendships and relationships are extraordinary responsibilities. We live in a place that can be really, really tough. And when you decide to have someone be your friend, that is a responsibility. It's a way of saying, I'm going to help you walk this earth, and you're going to help me. And especially in a marriage, and especially because my wife's an actress. So we're both actors living in Hollywood. Yeah, it's a tough racket and a tough place. So when we have our home and it's the safe place, and I know that when my wife goes out into the world, it's going to be a challenge. So it's like a huge part of the way I view this relationship is this is, I don't take it lightly. This is the person that I take care of. And that has to be my number one goal in this world, because And I know you must be flooded with these feelings too, being a new father. It's an extraordinary responsibility. And I was on this podcast a couple of years ago, last year, and they're like, "Oh, what do you want to be remembered for as an actor?" And I'm like, I don't give a shit. I've got more important. I'm probably going to have a baby sometime soon. That's like, you know what? You want me to answer your question? I want to be remembered as a good dad.
Amen.
That seems like a cool goal. Oh, what about your legacy? My legacy. It just seems so goofy to me.
Sure.
But
sure. I mean, if you could have 1 million people watching you in a movie, but it's such a superficial relationship, because they just watch the movie, then they forget about it, they move on. Mm-hmm. But when you can impact someone in your life in a major way, right, that just has so much more of an impact. So speaking of relationships, yeah, you and Ben have become friends since you've met recently, and you've been wearing the COPALA clothes as well. I'm curious, just what has your been experience with the COPALA brand, with the clothing? What do you like about the clothing? What do you?
Yeah, it's clothes are so important. I mean, how we decide to represent ourselves to the world is important. There's an aspect and a layer to it that's, of course, superficial, and especially me. I'm of course, I want to look good and I want to feel good and everything. But yeah, I think what was amazing is I have all this COPALA clothes, and for some reason I was kind of wondering, there's something about these clothing items too, where I really just want to wear them because I just feel really good in them, and then I feel like I look really good in them. And I guess what's amazing is obviously everything about it Ben has curated to be both fashionable and to be have a good ethos associated with it. And I feel that in the clothes. And I feel like, I don't call me old fashioned, I'm kind of someone who kind of feels like everything kind of has an energy to it. And I could just kind of I feel the vibe so heavily in it. I feel like the relaxed adventurousness that I've always appreciated in myself. I've got other stuff that's a part of me that I don't appreciate, but that's one aspect of me that I really love. And I feel like I love representing myself to the world this way. I just do. And that's sort of the simplest way to say it, because how we choose to represent ourselves to the world is important. And yes, it does happen with our clothes. Of course, you want other people to look deeper eventually, be like, oh, what does this person have to say? But, it all starts with what we wear and how we feel. And, COPALA does that. And look, I don't know if it's the Supreme Cotton. I don't know if it's the exact measurements of how he made my arms look good in the shirt, or the sustainable source, or just the marketing, which is just so like, I don't know, just it's got this factor of connectivity for me that just makes sense.
You'll have to sneak in at your next movie. You've got to just like sneak in your own COPALA clothing to wear on camera. Like, no, I brought my own stuff. Yeah, I'm good.
Right? Yeah. No, they have you do that a lot more often than you think, and it's actually, as an actor, it's really cool. So even just to go on what I said, like, it's like what you wear really affects how you feel. So if it's if my character's wearing some clothes I don't feel comfortable in, or doesn't feel like the character or something, it actually really profoundly affects my performance.
I bet.
It's just like, oh, I don't feel like this guy.
Feel natural.
Which is why, like, especially if I have to do a screen test or a chemistry read, I'll wear the clothes that make me feel like that character. So I do a lot of like Westerns. I work a lot in the Western kind of space. So I really throw on that oil, the dirt, the suspenders. And it's like, it's not for the casting director. It's not because I don't think you have imagination, even though your imagination might be questionable, if we're being honest. You're not an artist, pardon me. Actually, no, casting directors are incredible. But I do it for me because it makes me feel like the character.
Yeah, it puts you into the mindset.
Totally.
I have to ask you, we're filming this in Austin, Texas. Richard Linklater's new movie, awesome movie called Hitman. You're in it.
Yeah.
He's a legend here in Austin, made a lot of his early films here. Do you have any stories about him, or what was it like just being part of one of his movies?
Oh, it was magical, man. I thought I was going to get fired after the rehearsal. So the scene in Hitman, it's just 13 minutes of straight dialogue between me and Glenn in this movie, right? And so we had to rehearse it because this is like 11 pages here. So we rehearsed it on my birthday, which was a cool birthday gift to go hang out with Richard Linklater and Glenn Powell. And but it was my first time really meeting him. I had only ever done screen stuff with him on Zoom or whatever. And he was so relaxed that it drove me crazy at first, because he just seemed like just so. He's just so chill. I work with directors all the time. They get, some are very nervous, some are very passionate, some kind of mixture of the two. It's a lot of intense energy. And he almost just, and this is not the case, but it always just seemed like he didn't really care that he was making a movie, and he was in a Padres shirt and, just wanted to talk about other things. But he was so nonchalant that I literally thought that he didn't like what I was doing and I was going to get fired. I literally went back to the hotel talking to my wife. I was like, babe, I don't know if he wants me here. But it ended up not being the case. And on set, he lets you improvise. He doesn't direct you. He just has it's almost like he's talking to you like an equal, or he's like spitballing with you, or you guys are just collaborating. He's so unlike any other director I've ever worked with. And that nonchalance is just a straight confidence and just a good layering of priorities. And so, yeah, we end up, we do this scene, and this big long scene, and it was just, it was extraordinary. And, at the wrap party for the movie, he went back to the normal, like, nonchalant kind of thing. And we were sitting there with a beer at the wrap party. He's like, well, yeah, I guess that's another movie, huh? Dude, you just made a movie. You're probably going to sell it to Netflix for $2 million. Be happy. Get excited. No, he's
I suppose when it's your, 15th movie or so, you have a little more of composure with it all.
Yeah, it was great. And the whole crew, we shot it in New Orleans, but the entire crew was from Austin.
Great.
Everybody was from Austin. And yeah, it was just, it was a tremendous experience. Cool to be a part of. Got to come here for the premiere and the after party and everything. And oh man, it was awesome being a part of such a fun, great movie there. So
yeah, he's such an interesting filmmaker, and I really enjoy that movie. I watched it before I knew you, but I now I want to rewatch it to see your scenes. But it's a great movie, so that's congratulations.
Oh
for
yeah, thank you.
Being part of it.
I was super proud to be a part of that one. So
cool. Well, listen, guys, this has been great. Ben, Mike, so great talking to y'all, and can't wait to see what the next exploration for us all is going to be.
Thanks, James. You're the best, brother.
Thanks, brother.